Hello guys, welcome to the next session of implementing CRUD operations using Angular version 16. So till now in this series we have completed most of the operations that we were looking for. So we have completed save operation, then we have completed select operation, then we have completed delete operation also. Now in this session we are going to work on the most important functionality, which is update employee details. So in this session what we are going to do is we are going to add one edit icon in front of every single row. So whenever we will click on this edit icon, we will get to the employee form, and then this employee form will contain all the details that we have like saved for this employee. It will be like automatically populate all the details. Whatever details we want to update, we can just update those details. Maybe we can just change some skills and everything, and we can change all those details that we require. And then we can, once we can click on save, the updated details will be saved to the database, and it will automatically redirect to our employee list component, where we can see all those details are updated successfully. If I just refresh it, we will get updated details. So this is the update functionality that we are going to learn in this session. So let's see how we can work on this functionality. So now in order to implement edit functionality, the very first thing that we have to do is we have to add one edit button at the end of every single row, something similar to this delete button. So let's first of all add this edit button. So in order to add, let me just go to the employee list component ts, and over here what we have displayed columns array. So at the end of this displayed columns array, before delete button, what I just want to add new column. So let me just give edit, something like this. Then we can just go to the employee list component html. Over here we already have added the delete button, so let me just copy this delete button and let me just put it before the delete button, something like this, so that I want my edit button to be like before the delete button. That is the reason we have to add before it. And then for mat column definition, we have to copy this name that we have just given, and we have to put it something like this. Rest of the things we can keep it as it is. We have to change this click event, but we will change it in a moment. Then we have to change the icon also. So let me just first of all go back to the Chrome, and this is how it is looking right now. We have to change the icon. So let me just search for edit icon, and we can just copy the name of this edit icon, and then we can just give it something like this. And we have to change color to the primary. If you want, you can just choose a different color, and now it will look something like this. The next thing that we want is we want one click event on this button, so that whenever we will click on this button, we can just go to our this particular form. So in order to do this, we have to write one function. So what we can just do, we can just come over here, and then we can just give the name as update employee, and the update employee function will take employee id as a parameter, something like this. Now this update employee function is not at present. If you just see, we are getting the error. So we have to create this function. So in order to create, let me just go back to the employee list component ts file, and over here we can just create this function. So this function will take employee id, which will be of type number, and it will return void, something like this. The next thing that we want is we want a router to be injected. So what we can just do, we can inject a router, something like this. And then what we want like we want to navigate to our existing page, maybe the create employee form page. So in order to do this, what we have to do, we have to just write this dot router dot navigate, and then over here we have to like pass some details. So very first detail that we have to pass is the path of the page, and then secondly we have to pass some data. So in my case, the data will be like employee id, because we want to pass this employee id through the parameter, I mean url. That is the reason we have to pass that employee id also. So the path will be like, if I just go to the app routing module ts file, so the path is nothing but slash employee. So let me just copy this path and let me just paste it something like this. Then we have to give the data. So data will be like employee id colon employee id. So this employee ID that I have received, I will just pass it as it is. So employee ID is nothing but a parameter name, and this employee ID is nothing but a value that we will receiving over here. Now let me just click on this, click on save, and let's see what happens on the UI. So if I just now click on edit button, now we are able to redirect to the our employee creation form. And over here, if you just see in the URL, we are able to see the employee ID on which we have clicked, edit icon. So now we are able to get this employee ID through the URL. The next thing that we want is, we want to fetch the data of this employee ID, and we want to show that data into this particular form so that we can edit it. So in order to do this, we have to use a resolver. So you must be knowing that resolver is a kind of a service which helps us to load data first before loading the HTML itself. So it will help us to um, load data first, and then once the data is loaded, then and only then it will load the HTML. This is the use of resolver basically. So in order to create the resolver, what we have to do, we have to create one new file. So if I just take you to the VS Code, so over here inside the app, I will just create one new file, and I will just give the name of the file as employee resolver. So maybe we can just do employee dash resolver dot ts, something like this. Now what we have to do, we have to just write some lines over here. So we have to first of all write export, and then we can just give a constant, and then we have to give a name like employee resolver, something like this. And this employee resolver, we have to we have to give one function. So we have to give like resolve fn, which means resolve function, and we can just give type any as of now. Now this is the if you have used earlier versions of Angular, like Angular 10, 12, so in that we have to create service, and then with the help of that service we were supposed to create the resolver. But after Angular 15, 16 onwards, the syntax is changed. That is the reason you might get some different syntax over here. And then what we have to do, we have to give the equals to, and there are some parameters that we have to add. So those parameters are something like this. So very first parameter that we have is, we have to use a root. So first of all, let me just find if I just generate this template directly, maybe. So let me just use, okay, so we don't have these options. So what we have to do, we have to just give equals to, and then we have to add some parameters. First parameter is nothing but a root, which will be of type activated root snapshot. Then the second parameter is nothing but a state, which will be of type router, which will be of type, let me just try to find it out. Okay, so which will be of type router state snapshot. And then the third parameter that we need to add is, we need employee service, because we want to make API call in order to fetch the details. That is the reason we need to inject our employee service. So let me just inject employee service, something like this. And then what we have to do, we have to just for this employee service, we have to use one inject function, so that it will inject the employee service. And then what we have to do, we have to just give employee service, which is my service name. And lastly, we have to just give a return type. In my case, the return type will be observable of type employee, something like this. And then we have to give arrow function, and then we have to give this curly brackets, and inside of these curly brackets we have to write the logic. So employee resolver is nothing but a kind of function that we have just created. That function, this is how the function will look like. And as of now we are getting the error. The reason is, as we have given the return type as a observable of employee, so we have to write some return statement over here. So what we have to do, next thing that we have to do is, inside the function, first of all we have to check the employee ID that we are receiving from the URL. So in order to do this, what we can just do, we can just create one variable of type employee ID, and in order to get the employee ID from the URL, we have to write root.parammap, and then we have to write a get function, and then we have to give a parameter name over here. So in my case, the parameter name is employee ID, something like this. So we have to paste it over here. And if you just want to find it out again, you can just go back to your update employee function, and this is the parameter. This is like a value of the parameter. I mean, this is the key of the parameter. So we have to give this particular key over here. The next thing that we have to check is, we have to first of all check if employee ID is present. Then we have to make API call and get value, or maybe get data for given employee ID. Else we have to like uh, create and return empty employee details. So if it is not present, then it basically means that we are trying to create a new fresh employee details, and we have to, that is the reason we have to pass those empty details. So if employee ID is present, what we have to do, we have to just return this dot employee service dot and get employee, maybe let me just go back to my employee service, and over here we have one function of, okay, so we have to create a new function over here. So what we need is, we need one function so that we can get the employee details with the help of ID. So we have already created all those APIs, so we have to just use that API. So if I just go to the Postman, then we have already created this particular API. So the API name is /get/employee. All the related links you can find into a description box. You don't need to worry about this. If you just want to use API and everything, I have given all the links into the description box. So this API that we have to use, so in order to do, what we can just do, we can just create one new function, get employee, and we can just add one parameter over here, which will be like employee ID and having the type number, something like this. And then what we have to do, we have to just use return this dot http client dot get, and then over here we have to give type as employee, because we are getting like only one employee at the same time, because we are passing ID over here, and we have already created this API in employee interface. So we have to give the type over here, and then we have to give our API path. So in my case, the path is like, we have to give a backticks and then dollar curly brackets this dot API slash, and let me just go to the Postman and let me just copy this name, and at the end we have to append the employee ID. So we have to keep the slash and we have to then append the employee ID. So we can just use employee ID, something like this. Now this function, this get employee function, we have to use inside our resolver. So we can just use it something like this, and then we will get some data. Now over here we are getting some issues. Let's see what is the issue that we are getting. So it is saying like this dot employee service, we are unable to find it out. So okay, so we have to remove this, we don't require this, we can just directly use it as it is. And then what it is saying, it is saying like argument of type string is not assignable to type parameter type number. So over here basically this employee ID is of type string, and over here we want it to be passed as a number. So what we can just do, we can just cast it or maybe convert it from string to the number. So in order to do this, we have one function that is called as a number, and that in that we have to pass this employee ID as a parameter. And if at all we didn't get any employee ID, then we have to, as I said, we have to pass the empty details of employee. So we have already created those empty details in the create employee form. So if I just go to the employee dot component dot ts. If you just see, we have already created these empty details. Now what we don't want these empty details to be passed from here itself. Instead we want to pass it from our resolver. So what we can just do, we can just maybe I'll just control X this, and I'll just go back to my resolver, and then over here let me just paste it. Now we have to give the type as a const, and then lastly what we want return. And as of now we have to pass it as observable. That is the reason we cannot pass employee directly, so we can't write like a return employee, because we want to like return the observable instead of direct employee. So what we have to do, we have to convert this to the observable, and for that we can just use off function, something like this. Now our resolver is ready, and we are like done with the resolver. The next thing that we have to do is we need this resolver to be used inside our app routing module ts, because we have to tell the Angular that um, for my this employee component we have to use one resolver. So let's see how we can add. So for this employee um, component we have to just like give a comma, and then we have to give like resolve, and then we have to give colon, and then we have to give like these curly brackets. Then we have to give one name, employee. So this name is basically, I will just tell you like where we need to use this name, but as of now you can just give any name over here. And then we have to give the function name. In my case it is, the function name is employee resolver, something like this. And now let me just save these changes. Now inside my employee component ts we are getting some issues, so we have to, in order to resolve this, what we have to do, we have to like first of all create one property employee, and as of now let me just give the type as any, something like this. The next thing that we want to do is we have to go to the ng on init, or maybe in the constructor. You can just give it anywhere. So I'll just go to the ng on init, and then over here what I will just do, I will just first of all inject one more service, and I will just make it as a private, and I will just make it as a activated root, and the type will be like activated root, something like this. Inside the ng on init what we want, like whatever data that resolver is passing to us, we want to fetch that data to be inside our ng on init. So for that reason what we have to do, we have to use this dot employee is equals to, and then we have to just use this dot activated root dot snapshot, and then we have to give data, and inside this data we have to give these brackets, and inside this we have to give a single quotes, and inside the single quotes we have to give the name of the data. So in my case the name of the data is employee, so make sure whatever you have given over here, the same exact same name you have used over here, something like this. The next thing that we can just do, we can just first of all do one thing. We can just first of all try to use console.log to see whether till now whatever we have implemented is working as expected or not. So let me just use console.log. Let me just save these changes, and let me just see if my application is running. So yes, it is running. If I just go back to the Google Chrome, and now let me just do one thing. Let me just go back to the employee list, and let me just open the console. And now if I just click on this 254, so yes, now we are getting the details of 254 employee, and we are getting these details also. And if you just see, as soon as we have added this like as soon as we got the employee details, those are automatically binded to our form, because we have used a two-way binding. So this is how it is working like perfectly fine. The next thing that we just want is, we just want one more thing to be done. I just want to differentiate as of now whether the action that I am currently performing is like create employee action or update employee action. That we want we want to differentiate in between them, right? So that we can call the different APIs in the different situation. So what I will just do, I will just do one more thing. Like I will just write one condition. If the employee ID is present, or maybe if employee ID is greater than 0, then it means that we will be doing the update operation, and if it is 0, then it means that we are doing the create employee operation. So this is how I will just differentiate. So for that, what I have to do, I have to create one new key over here. I will just do one thing, is create employee, something like this, which will be of type boolean, and the default value will be the false value, something like this. And then what I will just do, I'll just come back inside my ng on init, and I will just write if this dot employee and this dot employee id greater than 0, then this basically means that we are doing the update operation, and for the update operation I will give this value as a false. This dot employee is create employee is equals to false. And maybe we can just do one thing, we can just keep the default value as a true itself, something like this. And else what we will just do, we will just make it as a this dot employee, this dot is create employee is equals to true, something like this. So this flag will help me, like if it is update operation, then it will be like the value of this key will be the false, and if it is create employee operation, then the value will be the true, something like this. And one more thing that we just want is, if we are performing the update operation, what we have to do, like we have to just check one more condition, like we have to check if this dot employee skills, I'll just let you know what I'm writing over here in a moment, not equals to empty quotes. Then what we have to do, we have to just write this dot skills, and I just want this skills array to be empty. And then the next thing that we have to do, we have to just write this dot skills dot, maybe let me just find, okay, so we have to just use this dot skills is equals to this dot employee, let me just find out the right key, skills dot split, and then we have to split it by the comma, something like this. So over here I'll just let you know what I have just did over here. So if you have following my series, so you must be knowing that we are using this skills array in a different scenarios. So we are using this skills array so that we can just, because we have these checkboxes and everything, right? So we have these checkboxes, and whatever we will check and uncheck, it will just reflect to these employee skills like disabled field. So we have this field and we have this checkbox. So we want, like if it is update operation, like we want our that data to be put it into the employee array also, because we will not be getting this array if it is update operation. That is the reason I just want to like keep this array up to date. That is the reason I am just checking if the employee skills is present, then I have to update this array, and then I am updating the array over here, something like this. So now let me just save these changes, and let me just first of all just go back to the Google Chrome. Everything looks perfectly fine. If I'm just updating some details, they are working as it is. And let me just change these details also. Yes, now it is working perfectly fine. The next thing that we have to do is we have to just call the exact, the APIs that are required. So we have already created this function which is save employee. If I just take you to the employee component HTML, then this is the form, and over here if you just see, like we have this ng submit function, and on ng submit we are calling this save employee function. Now inside this save employee, what we have to do, we have to like check whether we are performing update operation or create operation, and accordingly we have to call the APIs. So what we can just do, we can just go back to this employee component TS, and then over here what we can just do, we can just check if uh, is create employee. So if we are creating employee, new employee, then we will keep existing logic as it is. Let me just cut this code and let me just paste this code, something like this. And else if we are updating the employee, then we have to like call the new API for the update. So in order to do, first of all, let me just take you to the Postman, and we have already created this API. So let me just tell you, yeah, so we have already created this put API, and the API name is /update/employee, and then accordingly we have to like pass the details as a JSON, something like this. So it will work as expected. So we are going to use the same API itself. So what we want, we can just go to the VS Code again, and we can just go to the first of all employee service, because we want to create one new function for update. So over here what I will just do, I will just write public update employee, and we have to give one parameter which will be of type employee, something like this. And then what we have to do, we have to just write return this dot http client dot put, and put will return us employee details. And if I just show you inside the IntelliJ, if I just go to the employee controller, then if I just show you this put, then it returns the employee details. That is the reason I have used employee as a return type. And then we have to give our API. So we have to give the backticks dollar curly brackets this dot API. Then we have to give the API name. In my case it is like /update/employee. Let me just copy it and let me just paste it, something like this. And then we have to pass a second parameter which is nothing but our employee data, something like this. Now let me just save these changes. Let me just come back to the employee component TS. We have already injected the employee service. Next thing that we just have to do is we just have to call this dot employee service dot update employee, and then we have to pass employee details this dot employee, something like this. And then we have to just call the subscribe. Now inside the subscribe we have to give the different callbacks. So first callback will be for next, which is nothing but a success callback. So we have to give response which will be of type employee, and then we have to give this arrow function. And then over here what I can just do, I can just directly route it to the our employee list component. So let me just copy this line and let me just paste it, something like this. We have already injected the router, so we don't need to inject it again. If I just show you, we have already injected this router. And if at all we get any error, so we need one callback to handle the error also. So if at all we get any error, so we have to give ERR, which will be of type HTTP error response. So we can just maybe do one thing, we can just use console.log ERR, something like this. And now let me just save these changes. Let me just remove these extra spaces, and maybe we can just format the document also. And yes, now let me just save these changes and let me just see what is happening on the browser itself. Now let me just go back to the employee list. Let me just refresh these, and let's do one thing. For this employee 254, let's update the name and contact number, and we can just update the skills also. Let me click on edit. For Akash N, I'll just do Akash S. For contact number, I will just do some random contact number, something like this. We can maybe update a drop down also. Let's update the skills and let me just click on save. Now if you just see, for 254 we are getting the updated name, contact, address we haven't updated, but we updated department, and then we updated skills also. Let me just refresh it. So yes, we are getting updated value as it is. If I just go to the database, let me just take you to the database, and if I just use select query again, and if you just see, like we are getting those updated details over here. Now our update operation working as expected and perfectly fine. So this is how we can just write some logic to update any employee details If you still have any questions, let me know into a comment section. I know there are a lot of steps involved into this process, but we can't do anything. We have to follow these steps. If you still have any questions, let me know into a comment section and I will try my best to help you out in that case. I hope you enjoyed this session. I'll see you in the next session.